All right. Hello, everybody. Hello, 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 hello. We're going to talk about images for Facebook ads and really everything else that you're going to do in your career. But in this class, we're more focused on ads. The dogs are in the backyard, my hooligans, so they should not be interrupting us. I do try to make all of my videos succinct and to the point. However, ads are a little complex, and I'm sort of like Beetlejuice on crack sometimes. I get distracted and there's stories. So I do have a script. I try to stay on track, but sometimes I have some interesting things I want to tell you. And definitely take notes and indulge yourself with something to drink and something to eat. As you go through the class, you're going to start to understand the complexity of what we're talking about. So I do really encourage you to kind of make this your me time during the duration of the course, to sit back, relax, and then take lots of notes so that you synthesize the layers of complexity and the what do I want to say? Like the way that different layers sort of feed each other, and there's feedback mechanisms and things like that. So you definitely want to kind of write stuff down. So on to images. I used to get stuck when I first started doing ads, or actually really just doing Facebook, because I started working with Facebook and images long before there were even ads or ad classes. So there were no best practices when I worked with Facebook in the beginning. Everyone was just flailing and throwing up whatever they thought would work, which was usually a pretty racy book cover, like naked people, people in lingerie, very sexually compromising positions. And of course, you cannot do that anymore. By the way, if that's a surprise to you, if you didn't know that, make sure you make a big old note and underline it. No sexy nothing on Facebook anymore. And so while everyone was doing the really sexy stuff early on Facebook, I found that that was not my audience, and it didn't work for my books. For whatever reason, it just didn't connect. Now, an inexperienced author who has not sold a lot of books would start to maybe think at that point that it was their fault. But I had sold a lot of books, and I knew that people liked my work. So I was able to go, okay, the problem isn't really me. There's a disconnect somewhere, but it's not bad cover, bad book, bad writing. That's not the disconnect. I really feel for new authors these days, because it's hard to get that feedback from the market to know whether or not it is or isn't your books. It's hard to troubleshoot because you can't always really accurately identify your root cause. But I knew that it wasn't really me. I just knew there was some disconnect someplace else. So very early on, I had to figure out different approaches to images, different from anyone else. For whatever reason, it was just, also there's this thing where I'm the queen of glitches, so of course I had to do it differently. Of course I had to do everything, backwards, upside down, while on fire. I mean, that's sort of what my life is like when it comes to technology. So I did over time come up with a system with images, and that's what this video is how to select images, what image categories will help you with your ads. Now, not all images will be profitable, not all of them will convert and sell books for you, but I don't want to have just one kind of image all the time, because that's when you are creating a bias, whether that bias is how you see your book or the bias is what you think works on Facebook. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself. You don't want to lock yourself in a box and throw away the key. You want to actually push the boundaries of your box all the time. And that way you'll be surprised. You'll capture an audience that you didn't expect to capture with pictures you never thought would work. It absolutely happens. And then there are pictures where you kind of figured they were going to be a dud, and yeah, they were a dud. You were right. But there's always a surprise somewhere in there, always. So don't pigeonhole yourself, if I can talk, and don't assume that you know your audience. Cover a lot of different bases with images. So let's look at the heat map of a Facebook ad. So the white here where it says you will read this first, that's your image in a Facebook ad. So your image is your very first, what I call ad hook. It's, we think about hooks in story, but in ads have to have hooks too. So your first ad hook is your image, and picking the right image is just critical. You have to get it right. Then they come down here, for whatever reason, the eye drops down and it reads the headline. And then there's that little, I'll show you in the ads interface, but there's a little section where you can add even more text. It's in a smaller font. For some reason, we go down further, and if we like what we see, we zoom up to the top to read the bulk of the text. And so by the time they're at the top of your ad, reading every word you're giving them, they're really involved. And we will talk about involvement probably a little bit in this presentation from what I remember of the script, but more in depth on ad copy, because it relates to principles of marketing and what we know about consumer behavior. So if you can get someone to drag their eyeballs all the way up here and read and read and read and read, that's good. That means they're really seriously considering what you're offering. So this shows, the main thrust here is this, blah, blah, blah. Why can't I talk today? The main thrust here is that you need to understand your image is your first ad hook. It is the first thing they notice, and it's the do or die moment in your ad. So they either decide to keep going, in which case the stuff down here is your second ad hook. The stuff up here is your third ad hook. So you've got to keep hooking and pulling people through your ad, just like we hook and pull people through our books, right? So these are the image categories. And actually I forgot to put one on here. It's in the presentation, but I forgot to list it. Patterns. Just write down patterns. So the best images, these are the categories I came up with. Some of this is because, like Marie Smith, she's the one who talked about eye contact, but a lot of it's just trial and error on my part. So eye contact, body language, and micro expressions are great. Eye contact is huge with humans. You always want to have eye contact. You want images that are evocative of mood and emotion, that they're iconic and striking, disruptive, unusual, unexpected, funny. Funny is a little tricky, but absolutely good thing to have in your toolbox. And you want your images to tie in with the words used in your ad. There needs to be a synergy between image and words. And then, like I said, add patterns to this list, because that's another thing another category of images you can use and look for. Then the big conundrum after that is, do I put my book cover on my ad or not? Do I need it or not? There's a very big school of thought that says, yes, you must have your book cover on your ad or take your toys and go home and quit already. I'm sort of contrarian because I have different experiences. And again, if I hadn't come into the market already having moved tens of thousands of copies of books, I would have taken that school of thought that says you need a book cover as gospel. But instead, because I was having so many problems, I was troubleshooting and trying different things and pushing the boundaries of my toolbox to see what would work best. And I have found that actually, no, you don't always need your book cover. Now, you can use your book cover and it can be very powerful for selling your book. Sometimes, though, it's the opposite. So the real answer is you are going to have to test it. When you run your ads, you're going to have to figure out, do readers like it when they see my book cover better, or do they respond better when there's no book cover? And you're just going to have to test it and see. So no one true way. There are people out there who will lead you to believe that there is a one true way, and I am sorry, there isn't. And the more I go into learning about business and marketing and the psychology of persuasion and consumer psychology, the easier it is for me to tell that the absolutists are not people who have ever pushed the boundaries of their box. and their knowledge base is actually kind of limited. So don't ever get sucked into the one true way stuff. Try things and test things. Facebook is an eternal sandbox where you're just going to have to try stuff a lot and see what happens. Let's talk about iconography for a moment. It is definitely the case that we are visual artists. I don't think that most authors think of themselves that way. We don't necessarily perceive ourselves as visual artists, but once you realize that readers are playing books like movies in their heads, then you kind of get the idea, yeah, we are visual artists. We make pictures with words. So we want to have a visual mythology and some symbology in our work and in our marketing. Also, every genre has its own mythology and symbology and visual representations that are iconic. So you need to know what those are and how you can play off of them when you're marketing your book and writing your story and imbuing your story with iconography. All right? You want your iconography to be related but also distinct. We don't necessarily want to copy people, although sometimes it's good to bring in iconic images from books in the past that sort of were landmark reads for genre and sort of integrate those images into our ads. But you want to be careful about copyright and trademark. All right? We use the iconography to communicate visually with readers. Testing images. You learn what images will convert by running ads and spending a ton of time on social media. You've got to do the work. You've got to have skin in the game and you have to take hits. You cannot sit on the sidelines and wait for someone to give you an image that will convert for you. It doesn't work that way. Your art is your art. Even if we're in the same genre, we are often using a different voice or angle. We might even be actually targeting different readerships. So it's not one image for all books, for all authors. That's not really how it works. There are some images that do end up being sort of evergreen, that they always work well in almost any ad, but you can't count on that. And I'll explain why as we go. So it's not the case that I can hand over all my images that worked for me and then you'll have the same experience. That's hard to do. It's very individual and it has a lot to do with voice, because I can draw them in with image and then lose them in the voice or fail to have a good hook in my words. So it's not plug and play. You have to spend time to run the ads and post things on social media just to see what happens. Test images in Facebook groups. Look at what images are popular on other platforms. You'll hear me say this a lot. Popularity signals resonance. Organic activity signals resonance. That's important to know. It's important to recognize when you see it happening. You're going to want to grab images that have lots of resonance and save them in a lookbook. Just hang on to them. They're probably copyrighted. They're probably trademarks. You can't use them, but you can certainly use them to inspire what you do visually, right? And when you get to the point in your branding where you want to customize artwork so that you're the only one that has a certain look, you can use that lookbook to kind of go, I liked this element and that element. Let's combine them and put them in this image with this guy in these colors. No. And then you'll have a really nice custom image that's built on a foundation of things that are already proven to work, which is a really nice hack. It saves you time. It saves you that angst of, I'm paying money to make custom ad images and stock art, and I don't know if it's going to work. But if your foundation, that information on what's been popular and what resonates, if you have that foundation and use it to inform your custom artwork, your visuals are more likely to do well. Do you see the connection there? Let's see. I've been doing this for 6 years. I'm just looking at my script when there's pauses. I'm just looking at the script because I do occasionally go off script and then I have to go back and see, did I already say that in my riff or do I have something else to tell you? So it's been 6 years or so for me where I've been working on Facebook trying to get engagement and trying to run ads. And I now have a nice stable of images across multiple categories that I know are reliable, that I know work well for me. And that's where you want to get. It takes time, though, to figure out what those images are for you and your brand and your books. So the sooner you start, the sooner you know, the faster you go, the quicker you'll get through the learning curve. And I don't think people really explain this a lot when they're teaching different classes about Facebook ads. First of all, literally no one offers categories of images like I do. But also, no, there's sort of this thing where people just are like, here's the ad. You have an image, you do this, you do that, you put your book cover on it, done. And then people do that and it doesn't work because there's no discussion of what are good images for ads. And some people have really awful eye for marketing, for visual marketing. So some of us have an eye and some of us don't. Some of us have an eye and for whatever reason it still doesn't connect with ads. So you need to have some sense of what actually works and what is actually a good idea to go with for an image. So in a lot of classes you don't get that. You throw up the ads and they don't convert. So you first have to sort out what images work, then what ad copy works, and then what audiences work. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this whole class is those three components. Until you get those three solid, you're going to have problems with the ROI on your ads. So that's one of the reasons as we go through the class where you'll hear me emphasizing cheap ad spends, because you should not be spending a lot of money on your learning curve. You don't need to. So you want to spend as little as possible while you're testing and figuring out what works well for your books. So we are going to look at actual Facebook ads, but right now we are just looking at images. So not everything I'm going to show you in this presentation are from ads. They're just good examples of those categories that I've given you. So they're not necessarily even stock photos. So you shouldn't do that for ads. You should always pay for the stock art. You should never, violate copyright or trademark. But for a presentation, I just wanted to have really good examples to show you. So I went off the reservation a little bit just to make sure we have all the information you guys need. All right. The main thing is you want to select a range of images and visual concepts to represent your story. So we're going to get to the pictures here in a second, but I want to make sure this doesn't get buried. So you have all those categories. You want to have lots of images in those categories and be testing several categories all the time. I've taught this class a couple times, and so it's interesting. I've seen students not do the range of images, and you need to do that. I want you to push yourself really hard, because what happens is a lot of my students that do follow directions and select a range of images, they get surprised by what performs well. So don't deny yourself that part of the learning curve, okay? So here is a picture from our first category of images: eye contact, body language, and micro expressions. So humans are conditioned to read faces and read emotion, and buying books as an emotional activity because readers are looking for an emotional experience from reading. So if you can get the eye contact or body language or micro expressions to connect emotionally and signal the kind of experience readers want, they will engage with your ad and be more likely to buy your book. Now, this particular picture I consider a micro expression because the eye contact isn't direct. He has a lot going on with his mouth and his posture. Here's another way to do eye contact. Typically, the most compelling eye contact will be direct front on, but you can also do different things too and see what happens. There's a synergy that happens between your words and your images. So sometimes images connect with your words really well and it just works. Sometimes you might need direct eye contact. You might not be able to get away with something like this. Depending upon your genre, you might be able to get away with just animal eye contact in your ad. Animals absolutely count. Now, when it comes to body language, you want, like I keep saying, you want your visual dynamics to align with your ad copy text. They should relate to each other. They should feed each other. I do see people put together ads where there's a picture of people hugging, and then the ad text is about murder. I've absolutely seen those kinds of disconnects. I've also seen more subtle disconnects where the ad copy is in the heroine's voice, but the picture shows a dominant male with a female whose emotions don't match the words. So you can make really subtle mistakes in emotional connection between image and words. So you want to avoid that. Sometimes it can work to have friction like that, like the picture doesn't quite match the text, but more typically you want that connection and that synergy. There should be the same emotional note in the picture and in the text. And when we get to the part of the class where I'm evaluating your written ad copy, sometimes you'll give me stuff, students will give me stuff, and I'll be like, you know what? I can't judge this. I actually need to see the picture with it. So you can get situations like that too, where the pictures and the text really depend on each other. Setting. What do people like about your setting? When was the last time you researched your setting and looked at what visuals were available and considered how people view it? Research your setting. What's considered iconic? What do people think about it? Search on Facebook and Instagram, see what people are posting, what the hashtags might be. When people congregate around an image related to your setting, that means it's iconic. It resonates. Again, popularity signals resonance. And you'd be wise to incorporate that energy somehow. Ideally, as you continue on with deepening your knowledge of marketing and Facebook ads, ideally you're going to see things come into your writing process. Like one of the things that comes into my writing process is when I'm editing, I sit there and I think, okay, so what are my visuals? And if I don't have any good visuals, I think about, well, what could I add? And I'll go and I'll look and see what's going on in the internet. What's trending in art? What's trending in whatever it is that's related to my book. Cars, it could be. What's a hot car? What's an iconic image for a car? And I'll think about that and I'll look for pictures. And if I need to go and write something into the story, as long as it fits, I'll go and do that. So that when they come into my book from the ad, they have a connection. There's a connection that carries all the way through for the reader's experience. Does that make sense? This is from my inspiration file. I have a book with a dragon in a cave, and I wanted something without any people on it so I wouldn't run afoul of any censors on Facebook. I like how there's a subtle romance signal. By the time your eye notices the rose petals on the bed, you know some things about what this picture is telling you, right? Let's get to mood. Setting can be a mood as well. So, you can make a judgment call. But since I had a person in here, to me, setting is just pure setting. Mood might have other elements. It might have people, it might have animals, that kind of a thing. You want to make sure your tones are coherent, your emotional tone. If I show this picture, for example, and I'm writing sort of a dark urban fantasy, people who buy based on this image and whatever ad copy went with it, and then read this dark urban fantasy I'm promoting, there's a disconnect there, and I might end up with some bad reviews. You've got to think about that. You want your tone, your emotional tone to match. If your book is not pink and frothy and frilly, then your ad images should not be either. Patterns. This was the one I had you add to the list. Patterns are quite trendy right now. Authors haven't really picked up on it yet, but in the business world, patterns are used quite commonly to disrupt the eye and capture attention because they're so unusual. We don't usually see big, bold, bright patterns in our newsfeed. So when we do see them, they stand out. It's very different. I like it because, again, like I just said, it's very different. And for authors, we can use patterns to signal genre, and we should. That should be a requirement. If you're going to use a pattern, it must signal genre, okay? Because in the business world, they use random patterns that don't mean anything and have no bearing on their message. Don't do that for books, okay? Always make sure the pattern connects to genre and story. You can also use images to trigger sensory memories in the reader. You could add this as a category. You don't have to. It's more of a approach, I would say. Definitely make a note because it should be in your notes. So with this image, what I was trying to sort of bring to mind for readers is that, really, if you think about it, reading is self-indulgent, self-care activity. So it's we read when we have time. We read exactly the things we like, and often we'll have coffee or tea or wine or snacks or chocolate, whatever. Like there's a self-care aspect to reading. So I wanted to bring to mind that sort of cozy moment where you're curled up, you've got some great coffee and a great book. Unfortunately, the ad, when I launched it, it immediately caught on fire and died in a horrible crash because Facebook took all of this wood grain in the back and decided it was text. And I got the too much text flag on my ad, and they refused to really serve it to anybody, which was annoying. And I didn't appeal because I just thought by the time the AI is that stupid, I don't want to have an ad that's doing really, really well and then hits a wall of AI stupidity randomly at some point in the future, which is a potential. You want to have symbols that relate to your genre or your story and or your story. You want stuff that's unique to you. You want your symbols that are in your books and then the symbols of your genre, and you want some sort of integration. We want readers to be happy when they read our books. So when they click to our landing page, we actually want them to buy, right? So you want to have lots of unconscious symbols that will resonate for readers. You want to get to the emotional piece of the brain and get into the emotional decision-making process in order to make a sale. See, if you engage Spock brain, that's too logical to get sucked into story, and you are so much less likely to make a sale. Readers are not Spock. They are not buying a spreadsheet for doing their taxes from you. They're buying a journey and emotional experience. So you need to make sure you engage the emotional brain. Humor. Is it a penis? Is it a dog? Is it a penis dog? Listen, if this is in your newsfeed, you're going to stop and you're going to look for a second because you're going to be like, what? So stuff like this, unexpected, can be really useful, and it's funny, right? The tricky part is sometimes getting the laugh doesn't mean that you get the sale, but you can use humor to connect with audience and then push for the sale with a separate campaign later. Unexpected novelty. I don't know that this image would convert, but you don't see stuff like this in your newsfeed very often. And with the right wording, the right word hooks, and the right ad copy, it could perform really well in certain genres. I love this picture too, because at least for me, I mean, I hope it's the same for you, but for me, when I see this, I immediately want to know what happened. I mean, this fox is like drunk, passed out in the flower box, and there's some kind of disco ball in the background. If it's me, if that's in my newsfeed, I am stopping everything I'm doing and I'm going to read all the words because I just want to know what happened, right? If you can make people wonder, that's a good thing. So disruptive, unexpected, unusual. Hopefully you've heard of the Fire Festival, which was a huge scam, but their social media campaign was seriously cutting edge. And I continually recommend the Hulu documentary about the Fire Festival. They used a lot of disruptive marketing techniques on social media to get attention and establish their event as an exclusive, high-end event. So it was really interesting, their marketing. It's not that you're necessarily going to run out there and copy what they did, but it's always good to expand your knowledge base because it'll help inform your decision making as you're creating your ad campaigns. So now we're going to go into some tips. If you struggle to find pictures for any of these image categories, it can be a signal that your story is weak in visual elements, that you don't have strong visuals. Sometimes it just means you're new to this and you're kind of developing your eye, you're not really sure, and that's normal. Don't worry about that. But do kind of sit there when you're having problems, do consciously ask yourself, do I actually have visuals in my story? What are the visuals in my story? Actually ask yourself that question. And if you can answer it, great. And if you can't, you might want to think harder about what you can put into the book that'll give you a strong visual. Sorry, tongue-tied again. Work what's popular into your stories. So it's like I said a little earlier, I'll write stuff in if it'll make the advertising and the marketing work better. So as long as it's not totally messing up the story, it's easy to add some stuff for marketability. So do that. When you mirror what people have already proven to respond to in your stories, so long as you're not infringing on copyright, trademark, no plagiarism, but you're creating resonance. So you're speaking to the subconscious mind, and there's subconscious associations, which can be very, 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 very powerful. So the human brain has the emotional impulse first, and then the rational decision making is second. There's a lag. Okay, the emotional brain goes first. So when you grab onto the emotional brain and you cause that part of the brain to light up, now you've got to get past the logical brain. That's your next hurdle as a writer who's advertising books. So your hooks have to be really, really strong to get past the rational brain. I think I'm actually going to talk about that. Yeah, next slide. So please remember, we're not transactional in our marketing. We're not here to say, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. No. Look, when you do the buy my book shtick, you sound like everyone else who is marketing out there, and it is just noise. People are numb to it. You're just another book to buy. No. When you highlight the emotional experience and the journey of your story, that's way more powerful than buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. So we're working, when we highlight story and the journey and the emotional experience, we're working on the level of subconscious desires, subconscious needs and wants that readers are looking to fill. They may not necessarily recognize them consciously. So it can be very persuasive. The right image can be very persuasive because it'll speak to those subconscious needs and wants. I'm just looking at my notes. Popularity signals resonance. So whenever you see that something has become popular, like I've said, recognize that means it's resonating, and you need to kind of look at that. What can you do that's like that? How can you use that popularity to your advantage? Stretch your imagery outside of the box. You want people to buy your book. So if you want people to buy your book, you need them to spend time on your ad. Scientifically, we know that when people pick things up, when they touch them, when they come back, we know that they're more likely to buy by lots of percentage points. So how that translates into social media, because we're not a physical bookstore, they can't physically pick up the book. On social media, what that translates into is lingering, hovering, looking, clicking, scrolling past it, and then scrolling back. That means when they're doing that means they're engaged and they're more likely to buy. And Facebook absolutely tracks those metrics. There's actually a spot in the ads interface where they'll even show you time spent on an ad. They don't do it universally for all ads, which is kind of annoying, but they absolutely do track it. And in some places, you can actually see what the time is. And if you get a rep, if you ever get a chance to talk to a Facebook ads rep, they will tell you on that image measurement that if it's below a second, that means your image, on that time measurement, if it's below a second, that means that your image sucked, that your audience is not responding to the image, and it's the image that needs to change. So that goes back to the heat map. That makes sense, right? Because the image is the very first ad hook. It's the very first thing that captures attention. You get a gold star from Facebook the more time people spend on your ad. Like Facebook sees that as a positive, so your ad gets positive marks. Oh, we kind of covered that, right? So, the Puritans. All right, the word Puritan bot is my word. No, it's not. Don't run around in public and talk about Puritan bots, because I don't think anyone will know what that means. It's just me that says Puritan bots. As of June, Facebook sort of decided that we were all Russian trolls selling Viagra. So there's been a lot of problems with their AI. They've got this army of AI enforcing their policies, but the AI is sort of drunk and it's not going very well. If you want to stay out of trouble, and you should, you need to avoid sex, violence, gore, blood. So that means no skin, no sex, no touching, no kissing, no guns, no violence, no gore, no blood. Facebook also scans your words for negativity. They're analyzing the syntax as well. They don't want negativity. I don't know how that's going to work with excerpts and things like that. Like if you're doing a murder mystery and you have an excerpt of the autopsy or something. I don't know how they're flagging that. I haven't heard of any problems, but there's a potential to where any snippets that we share or blurbs that we share could trip this AI that's like, oh, that seems negative. We don't like negative. Let's downgrade this post. Oh, don't serve this ad to that many people, please. You don't want to trigger that. The other thing is very important because a lot of people do not understand this. I have personally experienced this. I have seen lots of authors who've experienced this. As of June, at least, Facebook upgrades their AI. Okay, and they had a big upgrade in June. Then what they do is they retroactively go back through all of your ads, all of your account activity with the new upgraded AI. So stuff they approved 5 years ago, they start freaking out and rejecting and giving you flags on. This stuff that's dead, it's not even running, and they're flagging it. So be aware that you have to withstand a retroactive account review as the AI gets tighter and tighter. The Puritan bots get more uptight as time goes on. So play by the rules, play clean, because being sneaky can bite you in the butt. So when they go back through your ad history retroactively and they flag everything, you get negative demerits marked on your account metrics. And now maybe you're paying more for ads. Now you're having a harder time getting your ads approved. Your life is harder now. So that's one big reason why you want to play clean. Now, in a way, the Puritan bots are a good thing. The scrutiny is a good thing. It requires you to figure out why readers will buy your story and how to signal that to them with very compelling precision. You cannot rely on the crutch of sex. You cannot rely on the crutch of violence. You have to actually go deeper to convey what your story is about. So I like this because you're going to understand your story really well, and that's going to just make you a better marketer across the board. And a lot of people don't know this compliance stuff that I'm telling you. So they're getting their accounts shut down the second they run an ad. So you now have a big competitive advantage. It does take time, though. The learning curve does kind of suck. I'm sorry. But this class will make it go way faster than it would for somebody else. You're learning what took me years to learn. So I've compressed the learning curve for you. If you diligently work through this class, you're going to be so far ahead of the average author. It'll be crazy. And it does get easier and faster as we go. Now, here is a problematic book cover. This is a lot of man booby for Facebook, you guys. And I would never run an ad with this, even though I probably would get approved because I'm sort of whitelisted at the moment. But I'm not ever going to run this cover as an ad. I've abandoned the idea that there will ever be man chest in my ads. And when I do make book covers, I try very hard to put everyone in clothes. The man booby covers for me are just the cover of last resort because there's not a lot of stock art. The cover artists are not understanding the problem with marketing books with man booby. They don't get it. So most of them are still doing man booby covers, and that's their default. And then there's also not a lot of stock art available with clothing. I don't have a lot of hot men wearing clothes, unfortunately, to choose from. But whenever possible, I put people in clothes. So what I've done years ago, I started working with my cover artist, and I would say, take all the words off the cover, because I would get flagged all the time for too much text. Facebook does not like a lot of text and images, and they used to be super uptight about it. And their book covers are supposed to be the exception. Wording on an actual product is supposed to be an exception, but their AI can't figure that out reliably. So, and I probably could get it through an appeal, but appeals aren't forever. So appeals are sort of worthless because what happens is I do the appeal and they're like, oh, you're right, Michelle, that's just the book cover. Yeah, you can have the title on that, no problem. But then if I go in and edit my ad, which we'll talk about later, it'll trigger the flag again. You lose the appeal. So now, anytime you want to increase your budget or something's going on with your ad that you need to tweak, you can't do it without triggering that flag again, and your ad will come to a halt until you appeal it again. And so that's just like, I'm just like, listen, let's just sidestep all of that mess. Just take the words off my cover, please, and send me my cover for the retailers with words, my cover for advertising without words. And that's what I did for a long time. Then with the Puritan bots, I got to cropping. So this is an ad image that I used that eliminates the man boobie problem. And the nice thing is there's now a connection between my image and my landing page, which you don't have to have, but it's often nice. And it's a valid piece of advice that, it's good to have some sort of visual connection. You don't have to do it. I'm constantly not doing it and making money, and it's fine. But this is a little piece of advice where if you're struggling with conversions, it's nice to just sort of crop your cover, make a nice little graphic for your ads out of a piece of your cover. And this is all appropriate. It won't get flagged. I'm not going to have problems, and I can run ads. And I did run ads with this, and this ad was profitable. Okay. Just checking my notes here. So landing pages with images can cause problems. So your book cover, you killed yourself, you busted your butt, and you got a beautiful book cover and everyone's wearing clothes. Well, and you're linking to Amazon, because a lot of us do, or any other book retailer, and the reader clicks over from Facebook's AI goes and scans the landing page before they approve your ad, and they look at everything on the landing page. Now, your cover's fine. You did your job, right? But all of those sponsored ad books that Amazon's got, all of the other books that other sites are listing, those can be a problem. If there's a lot of man boobie, if there's a lot of sexy times, because Amazon, for example, does not enforce their terms of service for images. They should, but they don't. You can get your ad flagged because of other people's man boobie. How fun is that? That's really annoying. It's not super common, but it does happen. So when you're putting your ads together, you have to get your imagery done. Then you've got to look at all your landing pages and see what kind of ads are running. And go ahead and try it. See if they'll approve it. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. And if you get dinged, what I've been doing is I just email the retailers. I email Jeff Bezos, and I'm like, look, I can't run ads to my book because your book covers that you allow through sponsored ads don't conform to Facebook's terms of service, let alone Amazon's terms of service, because it's going to take all of us sending those little emails to kind of get the industry to go, people are willing to pay money to send free traffic to our website where we make money, but they can't do it because of all our man boobie. Like you're waiting for the business case to develop where they understand that this is not good business and that maybe they need to enforce their own image standards. And it's also why I tell you to clean up your covers from here on out, because people are going to start complaining, and eventually there's going to be a crackdown on Amazon, guys. That is in the future. It is coming. The dynamics are all set up for it. Here are your technical specs. Ad images on Facebook should be 1080 by 1080 pixels for a square image, and the square image is like all the rage. That's like the popular size or shape or whatever right now. Or you can do 1200 by 628 for a rectangle. You can get away with like a little bit less roughly, but this is what Facebook says they want. You can use Photoshop or GIMP if you're handy, if you know how to use those programs. You can also use Canva, which is free, and Canva has auto-sized templates, so you don't have to worry about those pixels. BookBrush is also an option. BookBrush is like $100 for the year. It's a really cool software. I'm going to talk about I'm going to talk about it a little bit in the next video. Don't use copyrighted images. Use stock art. Memes are okay, but they are at your own risk. In theory, a humor meme with a celebrity on it, in theory, you could always get in trouble for that. It doesn't happen. It doesn't seem to be an issue. But I just want you to know that Facebook absolutely does have the technology to put in Hugh Jackman's face and have all images scanned, and they'll flag things that they think are using his likeness without his permission. Because that happened to me. I made a meme years and years and years ago. I made a meme like 5 years ago, and I did it with Hugh Jackman, and I got dinged by Facebook's AI. They have the AI for facial recognition. So of course, never use a celebrity, never use anything you don't own. But memes, are a gray area. I don't have an ethical issue with memes. Some people do get really uptight about it, but I just sort of think, practically speaking, these things are shared by millions of people, and they're going to worry about me. Silly. Now, I don't necessarily use memes as like a paid ad to sell a book, but I might use a meme to do, some audience building or connecting with readers. So just something to think about. Where to find stock photos, where to find your art, that's in the next video, because otherwise we're going to be here for 4 days. And we don't want to do that, right? We're not trying to do the Donner Party in Facebook ads, okay? Here's your first homework assignment. You need to go and look at covers and graphics with authors in your genre who have the career you want. I'd also like you to go back 10 and 20 years for iconic bestsellers. Think about what in your genre sold so well that there's fan fiction, fan art, that it's totally impacted culture, and look and see what's available around those books. It's very interesting to see what fans create, what fan pages are like. Look at the art of your genre in general, and then think about how you're going to align your imagery with your genre and what symbols are in your work. And you can share your thoughts in the forum, and we can have a discussion about what you're finding and what you're thinking about now. Students have consistently said that this video is like a big aha moment for them. I never expected that from this video. It's kind of surprising to me that this was the one, but I think it's just because there's so few people that talk about images anywhere near like I talk about them, that there's sort of an information gap. There's a lack of information. So people do find this helpful. So I'm curious to see what you think. And we are not done with images. We're going to do some more in the next video. We're going to do more with images throughout the class. We're not done. It's an ongoing learning curve. So if you're kind of feeling like you didn't get everything you wanted about images yet, just hang tight. If by the end of the entire course you still have questions, make sure you ask me and I'll do my best to answer. All right? And I believe we're done. That's the end. Thank you. I hope this was helpful.